Little girl begged bikers to help. You won't believe what they did. The diner was wrapped in a heavy silence, broken only by the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional clink of a coffee cup being set down near the counter. Morning sunlight poured through the wide windows, casting long golden beams that stretched across the floor like warm rivers of light. And in the midst of this tranquil, almost cinematic stillness, a small girl suddenly dropped to her knees. Her tiny hands trembled as they clasped together, her voice cracking as she cried out. Tears streamed down her face, sparkling in the sunlight like fragile glass beads. Every biker in the room froze, their eyes locking on her, stunned by the desperate plea that filled the air. It wasn't the kind of sight you'd expect to see in a place like that, not in front of men who looked like thunder and rode with a two. Yet there she was, a child pleading with them to arrest her. In a room full of hardened bikers, her voice broke the silence, raw and desperate. If you believe in kindness and second chances, and in moments that remind us that compassion still exists, then take a moment now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Bikershype. This story is more than just something to hear. It's something to feel. Her name was Sophie Maynard, and she was only 8 years old. The first time Sophie Maynard walked into the Devil's Diner, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was wild and unkempt, her shirt torn and dust-covered, and her knees scraped raw from running across rough pavement. The diner's usual crowd, members of the local Devil's Disciples motorcycle club, sat around the table, indulging in their weekly Sunday breakfast. It was a ritual, one they'd upheld for years. Among them was Grayson Hall, a man as solid as a wall with a silvered beard and arms covered in ink, each tattoo a mark of a life shaped by choices. He was the chapter president, a man of few words but undeniable presence. Grayson was the leader, feared by some and respected by all. When Sophie dropped to her knees before him, the entire diner seemed to freeze. Every head turned, every fork suspended in midair. Her voice quivered as she pleaded, "Please, please arrest me. I can't go back home." The words hit the men harder than they cared to admit. These were bikers who had seen it all, fights, loss, even prison. But nothing had prepared them for the sight of a child broken and desperate, begging for a punishment she didn't deserve. Grayson's jaw tightened, his stoic expression faltering for a moment. He knelt down, his massive frame moving with surprising gentleness as he tried to meet her tear-filled eyes. Behind Grayson, the others watched in stunned silence, some exchanging confused glances, others simply unable to tear their eyes away. Sophie's story spilled out in ragged breaths, each one heavier than the last. Her mother had passed away months ago, leaving her to fend for herself in a world that suddenly felt far too cold. Since then, she had been living with her mother's boyfriend, a man who had promised to care for her but had instead turned into something cruel. He blamed her for everything, the bills, his temper, the loneliness he carried like a toxic burden. Every night she would hide under the kitchen table, praying he'd leave for the bar so she could feel safe, even if only for a little while. Every morning Sophie would wake up hoping, praying, that someone would come and take her away from the nightmare she was living. That morning she ran. She didn't even know where her feet were leading her, her only focus on getting as far from that place as possible. It wasn't until she saw the group of leather-clad men outside the diner that her steps faltered. They were rough, loud, powerful, like something out of a dream. To her young, frightened mind, they looked like law itself. So in that moment of desperation, she thought, if anyone could arrest me, maybe they could also save me. The men were frozen, unsure of how to respond. They were accustomed to engines roaring, not the sound of a child's sobs. The youngest of them, a tall, lanky biker named Rhett, looked like he wanted to do something, anything, but he stood there, torn, his face a mixture of confusion and concern. Grayson stood there, rooted to the spot for a moment, his mind a whirlwind of disbelief and simmering anger, not at the girl, but at whoever had twisted her world into something so cruel that she believed she was the problem. He took a slow breath and spoke softly, asking where she lived, who had hurt her, and how long this had been going on. Sophie could barely answer. Her voice was a fragile whisper, only able to repeat, "Please don't send me back." Grayson straightened, his shoulders squared as he turned to look at his men. A single nod passed between them, silent yet resolute. They didn't need any words. Each of them understood. Every biker in that room knew exactly what needed to be done. They weren't cops, but they were men who knew injustice when they saw it. Within minutes, Grayson led them out, their engines roaring to life like a storm, charging toward the dilapidated house Sophie had described. Sophie stayed behind at the diner in the care of Marlene, a kind-hearted older woman who gently wiped her tears away and handed her a warm cup of cocoa. When the bikers arrived at the house, they didn't enter with anger. They entered with purpose. They moved like a solid wall, unyielding and resolute. The man who answered the door took one look at them. 10 men in black leather vests, and staggered back, his face draining of color. The sound of their boots on the porch was louder than his heart beating in his chest. Standing shoulder to shoulder, their expressions as cold as stone, the bikers formed an unbreakable line. Grayson didn't need to lay a hand on him. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken threats. "You'll never lay a hand on that girl again." Without another word, Grayson made the call, not to threaten, not to fight, but to the sheriff. By sundown, the man was in handcuffs and Sophie was officially placed under the care of social services. But the story didn't end there. Weeks passed and the devil's disciples continued to show up, not to intimidate, but to visit Sophie. They'd bring her small gifts, words of encouragement, and a sense of safety she'd never known. Each visit was a reminder that sometimes even the hardest men can offer the softest hands when someone needs saving. They brought her food, clothes, and even a small pink bicycle, the kind every little girl dreams of. With her name carefully painted across the frame, Grayson found himself checking in every day after work, telling himself it was just to make sure she was okay. But deep down he knew it was something more, something he hadn't felt in years. Sophie had awakened a part of him he thought he'd buried for good. He had once lost a daughter in a car accident. Her name had been Hazel, and she would have been just about Sophie's age now. The thought of her brought a pang to his chest every time, like an old wound that never fully healed. One sunny afternoon, as Sophie played outside with her new bike, she noticed Grayson standing by the gate, watching her from a distance. There was something different in his eyes that day, a softness almost imperceptible to the untrained eye but undeniable to her. When Sophie walked into the diner again, she didn't hesitate. She ran straight to Grayson, no longer afraid. Her eyes sparkled with a newfound joy as she told him about starting school again soon, living with a foster family nearby, and how she missed everyone at the diner. Grayson felt a lump form in his throat. The words didn't come easily, but when she hugged him, he didn't need to say much. He just placed his rough, tattooed hand gently on her back and whispered, "You did nothing wrong, kid. You were brave." That night, as the bikers gathered for their usual coffee, there was a quiet sense of pride in the air. They didn't need words to share it. Each of them knew that Sophie's strength had somehow touched them all. The conversation that night wasn't about road trips or engines. It was about Sophie. Without hesitation, the bikers decided to sponsor her schooling, to be there for every year, every milestone. They called her their little sister now, a bond forged in a moment of compassion they never expected. Months later, at a local charity ride, Sophie stood at the edge of the road, holding a handmade sign that read, "*Thank you for saving me." As the bikers rode by, the wind whipping through their hair, they slowed down as they passed her. It was a moment of connection, raw and genuine, and for the first time in a long time, the big, gruff men on their roaring motorcycles, men who had seen it all, felt something deep within their chests. It wasn't just a ride. It was a reminder of what they had done, what they had become. Men who once ruled the road with hearts hardened by years of struggle felt tears sting their eyes as they passed her. If this story has touched even a small part of your heart, take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe to Bikershype. Let's fill the world with stories that remind us kindness can come from the most unexpected places. Before we wrap up, I'd love for you to comment below. Would you have stopped for Sophie that day if you had seen her kneeling in the diner? I'm eager to hear what your heart would have said in that moment. Grayson never called himself a hero, but the truth was he had become one, not just for Sophie, but for everyone who witnessed the power of kindness in action. Grayson never called himself a hero, but every Sunday morning as the bikes pulled into the diner parking lot and Sophie's laughter filled the air, he would catch her smile and quietly return it. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting the world, It's protecting the smallest soul who believes the world has already given up on her. And for the devil's disciples, that was the ride of their lives. Not a journey marked by speed or distance, but by something far more meaningful, saving a little girl who would forever change their hearts.